Welcome to March, and that means that, well, you finally have Maze of Memories legal. So what are your top 10 decks for the format, then? Don't be like the 30% of you that, of course, just make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, make sure you guys got notifications on. That way you guys don't miss out more awesome content. So what in the world are our top 10 here? So we're going to start from what I think is on the bottom of the top 10, work our way up. Number 1 here is going to be Trap Tricks. Now, this is going to, people are going to be like, well, packs topped, you know, they've got regional tops. Yeah, they do, but I hate to tell you this, but Denko-Sekka's been moving into the format, and it's just, you know, you're a week, 2 weeks into the format, Denko-Sekka is showing its ugly head, and this is causing trap-related decks to kind of push down. The deck is still within the top 10, all right? Don't fret about that, because, you know, cheapness and price will definitely help this deck out. But right now, it's not looking too particularly good. But once again, you're still a top decent contender. You can still do things. It's just more and more not fun allowed cards are pressuring this deck down on the list of things. So I think number 10 is fair. Next up, technically number 9 is going to be Labyrinth. Now, somebody's going to be like, well, Robbie, this was the highest represented deck at the YCS. Like, why, or it'd be the third highest deck, but why are you pushing it down so low? Like, oh my gosh, like it doesn't make any sense. Well, here's the thing, right? Once again, Denko-Sekka, regional attendance. I mean, you've seen one of these in Top Cuts, if that. I haven't seen any tours or any 3-ers. And I gotta go back to the Denko-Sekka point here again. Like, back row decks are kind of struggling here a little bit. Doesn't mean it's not in the top cut of the, you know, the thing. It's just I'm putting both of the trap-related decks at 9-10 right now because they don't have good particulars about them. And if all of these decks are bringing in all this hate towards them, yeah, but Labyrinth still controls a lot of the good situations. You know, they can flip up Skill Drain before the Denko even attempts to do anything. It's just, it comes down to being a game of who goes first and who goes second, as is kind of tradition, honestly. Next up here, we're going to put NATURIA slash the Runic package with it. Now, this has kind of been a little bit more of an interesting thing. Robbie, you put Labyrinth too low. It should be above Runic. Well, I said the NATURIA Runic deck. Basically being able to have access to NATURIA Barkion Beast is pretty solid right now. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but it's been doing pretty all right in terms of competitive turnover. And it doesn't lose to a Denko-Sekka because it's going to maintain most of its, you know, spell and traps in its hand. Alright, as thank you Runic cards do their thing. I mean, you also have Runic Sprite as well, if you want to toss that into this category, but for the most part, you just got to consider your NATURIA package actually a viable deck down here at number 8. And I think, once again, that kind of makes sense to me. So, definitely very interesting to see the conversion turnover for this deck as well. Next up is P.U.N.K. Now, disclaimer here for this. I have seen, for success this format, P.U.N.K. Kashtira, P.U.N.K. Thurion, a combination of pure P.U.N.K. So many P.U.N.K. synchro decks right now that just want to play the draw package in it, that even in like whatever form of this deck that you are seeing, the P.U.N.K. package has rebooted itself. The big thing that I am seeing, though, is like the P.U.N.K. package feels a lot better this format than it previously did. Well, Psychic End Punisher is the reason for that. Decks do not have an out to Psychic End Punisher right now. And the fact that this deck just was like, oh, you know, just go ahead and toggle up via some synchros, look at my opponent wave, and put a big Psychic End Punisher on the field, and laugh at them as they try to out that is your deck's centralized win con right now. Plus, I mean, obviously loading up all of the good P.U.N.K. cards to back these particular things up. And it should win you a decent amount of games, honestly. So that's the P.U.N.K. experience right now. Next up, I'm going to put Plants. This is going to encompass Sun Avalon RIKKA with Thurion, all of your kind of plant variations that we've been seeing do things. Now, does this mean that plants are doing particularly good? They're above average right now. It doesn't mean that you can interchange this with P.U.N.K. if you really want to, but I think we've seen slightly more representation from plants than we have particularly via some of the other decks on the lower end of things here. So just kind of be aware that, you know, whatever plant engine you're kind of picking up and messing around with right now, it's working itself out, and it's got a decent amount of power behind it. And this one is for all of you plant players out there. Your deck's pretty decent right now. Robbie, Sun Avalon and whatnot is not the same. I consider it. Number 5 on our list here is going to be Sword Soul. So I debated on where to put Sword Soul, but I think the other 4 decks are just kind of inherently better on this. The big thing I've been seeing about Sword Soul is, now remember, I always called Sword Soul's end board pretty mid. Being able to end on a negate, an omni negate, and like the pop from Blackout. You do kind of lose to Nibiru. It's kind of always been this deck's problem, is one giant Nibiru just kind of ruins this deck today. But to be honest with you, this deck's consistent play is still pretty consistent, honestly, and that's the big thing Sword Soul has going for it. And I've seen Sword Soul grind out a lot of top cuts, and that's actually the thing I put this deck very high on the list is, if you see its conversion rate for like the 1 to 2 builds it does get in there, they usually end up placing relatively well. So that's one big thing you got to really consider is, you know, for the few builds that do get in, they're going pretty far. All right, now this one should be no shocker. It's actually going to be MATHMECH. Now the reason why MATHMECH is getting its number 4 slot here is, where are the buy steals at? Buy steals, buy steals, buy steals, buy steals. If they're anywhere, they're like the few copies in branded, and then they are the few in-between versions that will pop up in side decks. MATHMECH had a very good conversion rate this last weekend at regionals, which is kind of showcasing to me that people are looking at this deck right now and they're going, wow, you know, like this is the good stuff, Robbie. I agree. I'm very happy to see that, you know, the antics of MATHMECH is kind of back at it right now, kind of showcasing to us that this deck can be you know, a walking threat. And I mean, so many people don't know how to handle the boards for this, and then you'll blink and then you get OTK'd. Like, plus some really cool things that you can do within MATHMECH and some of the combo lines that I think a lot of people will kind of be like, wow, you know, like that can actually do that? Yeah. Next up is going to be Sprite. Now, the reason why I'm putting Sprite at number 3 is between the, oh gosh, what is it? The Evil Twin variant, what is it? The big rank 2 package. Thank you, Shirag and friends. Rune, all of your variations of this deck are doing pretty strong right now. It's just, it's taking people time to figure this deck out because, well, whoa, you know, lose an elf really hurt this deck. But it's a very consistent monster for what it wants to do. This and MATHMECH are kind of fighting head and head right now in order to kind of maintain the numbers that they want to see. So that's a really big thing right now, is if these two decks are kind of duking it out in terms of, you know, representation, I do think that that says something about this deck. So I do think that Sprite is at least whatever variation that you want to kind of go for to really consider for the top cut. Yeah, it's still pretty decent. Next up is going to be Branded. Robbie, Branded should be the best deck in the room. What are you doing? Well, I don't think so. As much as I want to be like, you know, Branded does have better matchups with Expulsion handing things over. Kashtira is just running it on home on literally just representation alone. And I think that's one big thing that you really need to think about here is, you know, matchups aside, both the top decks are going to have some issues, but Branded, for what it does, isn't incredibly super far ahead. Like, all of these decks in the top 10 can check each other. That's not impossible. That's the thing I like about this format right now is your particular top 10, it's not impossible for one of these decks to have a particularly, you know, crazier matchup over the rest of them. It's just everything's kind of falling into place. And that's kind of what we're seeing here with Branded. Second highest representation usually out here, tied for, you guessed it, best deck in the room. But by best, it's Kashtira. Bunny ears, Kashtira. The reason why this deck earns its top spot is via representation alone. Obviously, zone locking really scares people. They crap their pants and they go, I don't know what to do. This is so scary. Well, big thing here, ladies and gentlemen, is your end boards are pretty impressive. If your opponent doesn't open it out, or they just end on a Rise Heart plus Lance, and you open up, you know, Lava Golem, Sphere Mode, all this counterplay, and they have the Lance to make their guy unaffected, and you can't attack over it, well, it feels really bad. Happens sometimes. So it's a very strange thing. I also got to give a sub shout out to Tier Elements. They're not going to be mentioned in any of these videos, but they do have 2 regional tops, 3 regional tops at this point for this format. So that's something really to be considered there. But that's my top 10 for the block. When we get to the tier list, I'll explain a lot more of my reasoning for a lot of this stuff, or at least visually showcase where I'm putting things. But that's what I'm encompassing right now, based on regional data and things that I have seen so far. So what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think. And well, we have Rogue next. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.